At the end of July 2023, a little after 6 p.m. in the village of San Antonio de Pintiaco, in the El Sinai region of the Mayanas province, deep in the Peruvian jungle, 15-year-old Talia Davila Diaz was picking fruit for dinner as the rest of her family were only about 6 meters away from her. Standing at the tall tree in her yard, using her trusted stick to help her reach the juicy nectar high above, a task she had carried out countless times before, when suddenly the atmosphere around her changed. A gust of wind swept in. The leaves rustled restlessly, and a powerful low-frequency vibration pressurized her ears. Startled, she turned and in astonishment saw what appeared to be in the likeness of a man silently moving up the slope in her yard. He was about a meter off the ground and seemed to be surfing. Towering above the small Iquitu girl, he was about 7.5 to 8 foot tall, in a black or dark metallic bodysuit which seemed to shimmer, and he had a backpack, a strangely shaped cone that appeared to be at the back of his head. It was like the Green Goblin from the Spider-Man movie, her brother, Hiru, an eyewitness later described. He had a black hood over his head and menacing large, yellow, almond-shaped eyes. His footwear, jungle military-style boots that had 2 discs on each of the soles that attached to the hoverboard he was using. Talia's mind struggling to grasp the sight and frozen in fear as he was now right in front of her. Grabbing her by the mouth, he swiftly moved behind her, ripping her into his chest. Unable to move her head, eyes straight ahead in horror, when a second man, traveling the same path as the first, came into view. He too, dressed in the same shimmering bodysuit with a black hood and those terrifying yellow eyes. The only identifiable difference between them, this attacker was shorter, at about 7 foot tall. Taking some powder and moving quickly, he mixed in a liquid substance, turning it into a cream, and blew some of it up her nose. The first attacker hurriedly snatched some of the cream too and vigorously smeared it all over her face. Through the corner of her eyes, Talia seen what appeared to be a small laser scalpel. Loosening his grip a little to position the scalpel, he began burning into her neck. The pain now sweeping through her body caused her to jerk back spontaneously, attempting to escape the searing pain and intentionally shifting his mask, causing him to immediately stop. He moved his hand away from her mouth and slapped her hard in the face, this action allowing her to exhale a blood-curdling scream. The shorter attacker, now seemingly panicked, said in Spanish, "They needed to move and leave her." The taller attacker, not willing to let this catch go, grabbed Talia by her bloodied hair, dragging her body on the floor, trying to escape the scene. It was at this moment her brother and a neighbor arrived. Armed, both men taking aim, shot at these attackers. Their bullets finding the target made no impact at all. Dropping her, the attackers clicked a button on the ankle and at a high rate of speed shot straight up and disappeared. Semi-conscious, in a chemically intoxicated state, her small body bruised and battered, unable to speak and shaking uncontrollably, Talia was transported to Iquitos, a large city about 60 kilometers away from her village, for treatment. She was treated for burns on her neck, suffering severe trauma, doctors diagnosing her with acute post-traumatic stress disorder. This assault not only scarring her neck, but her mind too. And when they asked Talia what was it that attacked her, with all her strength she whispered, "Los Pelacaras," the face peelers. Mrs. Oya, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Nat and I'm coming to you from the beautiful shores of North Queensland, Australia, home of the Great Barrier Reef. Not an Australian accent? You are correct. I was born and raised in South Africa and immigrated to Australia about 15 years ago. Down in the description box below is a link to our newsletter. We will send you this adorable Mrs. O Investigates puppy sticker. It's limited to the first 1,000 subscribers. So do that, click on the link down below and get yourself one of these free stickers. With all that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Carl Sagan, an interesting man, once said, quote, "You have to know the past to understand the present," unquote. The Bible says, "The thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." Ecclesiastes 1:9, King James Bible. Let's go find the thing that hath been to understand the brutal attack on Talia. The village of San Antonio de Pintiaco is home to the Iquitos tribe. It is situated in the northwest of the Peruvian jungle, and according to the World Bank multidimensional poverty map, they are considered among some of the poorest people in the world. In their data, they explain the reality of what this actually means. Daily consumption and income is less than $2.50 US per person per day. At least one school-aged child per household up to the age of grade 8 has never been in school. No adult has completed a primary school education. Households also have limited access to water and energy. Most of their income comes from sustenance farming, and they are situated about 60 kilometers or about 40 miles away from Iquitos, which is in the Alto Nanay region in the Mayanas province in Peru. Interesting thing about Iquitos, it is the only city in the world that has no access by road. So the only way to get goods and people in is either by air or by boat. This region has a great history, dating back to 3500 BC, known as the Corral Soup civilization, recognized as the oldest civilization in the Americas and has been classified as one of the 6 cradles of civilization in the world, along with Mesopotamia, ancient India, ancient China, Egypt, Indus Valley, and Mexico. A food source was not, however, their main source of income in this civilization. It was instead cotton. And with the cotton, they would make fishing nets, thus helping them bring in large hauls of fish. And as a result, this added to their wealth. However, cotton was the main source of their wealth. Archaeologists also like to point out that they were different to the other great cradles of civilizations in other ways. There weren't many ceramic pots found in the digs that they did. They also didn't find many visual arts on the wall. However, they are known for their great monolithic structures and buildings. They also had what was known as a kupa knot, which was an intricately woven knot where they would store information on the material and then they would intricately weave it together, storing all their data and history and historical records in these knots. Another interesting note, there was not much weapons found in the ruins, leading many to speculate that they were a non-violent civilization. They worshipped a god known as the Viracocha, which is translated in English as the Sea of Fat. Pin that. Viracocha was known as the creator god, and blood and fat were the essential part of the offerings that were needed to be given to him. As the legend goes, Viracocha rose out of Lake Titicaca, bringing forth darkness to light. He made the sun and the stars and the moon, and he was known as the Gringo god. In that, he was known as the Gringo god because he had a pale skin, he had long white hair, he had a long white beard, he was very lean, skinny. Interesting fact, the word gringo comes from the 1800s when the US military was marching in the Mexican territories. The indigenous did not want them there, and the US military would wear green jackets. And as a result, the locals would yell at them and say, green go home, ergo green go. Back to Viracocha. On his first attempt at civilization, he created giants. However, they displeased him greatly. So he decided, scratch that idea, we'll flood the earth and then we'll rebrand to human beings. He made the human beings who were not brainless, and then he scattered them across the earth. Viracocha had what I'm going to be calling his angels. It wasn't clear where they fit in the structure, but I'm going to assume they were the angels. And they were known as the Pishtaku, which is a Cajun word which means to behead, to cut throat, or to cut into slices. Professor John McDowell of Indiana University Department of Folklore and Ethnomusology, yes, I practiced, when describing Pishtakus, he stated it, instead of sucking the blood, they suck the fat from anyone careless enough to travel alone at night, unquote. He made another statement, quote, people who are bony and skinny, it's thought they were wasting away, and they don't have a strong life force, unquote. He concluded his analysis of Pishtaka this way by calling them dark workers of iniquity that sought after the vital life force and blood and fat to deplete it for their own pleasure. If that's not a motivation for us all to lose some weight, I'm not sure what is. I was curious because I was wondering why the face, right? I mean, there's many other places you could find better store content of fat than the face. So I did a little bit of research on the Google machine, and I found in his book, Eat Fat, Get Thin, why the fat we eat is the key to sustained weight loss and a vibrant health. Dr. Hyman said the following, quote, 60% of solid weight of your brain is fat. If someone calls you a fathead, say thank you. Thanks, Dr. Harmon. These principalities, these dark workers of iniquity, were honored with blood and fat, and these honors of the blood and fat gave them sacred powers. Nathan Wachtel, I don't speak French, I hope that's okay, is a French historian, and he wrote in his book, Gods and Vampires, quote, the sacrifice of slaughtered animals and the offerings of their blood constitute the opening sequence of all religious ceremonies, unquote. They were not, however, only sacrificing animals. Every year, a ritual ceremony would take place known as the Lulalaika procession. A high priest and his entourage of advisors, assistants, usually a group of not more than 15 people, and a number of lamas would start a journey where they would walk about 1,500 kilometers through the Andes to the Wa'akuna Mountains, a high place. The caravan included children who were to be sacrificed, boys not older than 10 and girls not older than 14 years old. The children had to be attractive children. They had to not have a mark, spot, or blemish on them at all. I didn't find this in my research, but I would imagine that they needed to be a bit plumper than your average skinny kid running around. And these children were entrusted to a mama kuna. She was a high priestess, and she would take care of the children on the journey. The children were expected to walk the entire way of the procession, and the only time they were allowed to be carried is if they were too young to actually walk the route. Sometimes the parents of these children were sacrificed along with the children. However, most of the time this was not the case. And usually after giving your child over to sacrifice, they were rewarded with popularity and became esteemed in the community. They also acquired wealth and they had status amongst their peers. The entourage would usually walk slowly and silently. They would never turn their head left or right. They would keep their head straight ahead and slightly bowed. As they moved along the procession, they would stop at particular ritual sites along the way. This is where they would bring the llamas out, and then they would do a sacrificial offering to Viracocha of the llamas, grabbing the fat and blood and vegetables, which they would place either in clay pots that they got the clay from Lake Titicaca, or they would put it in gourds, which is from the pumpkin family, and they would carry their offerings to the Viracocha in that. As the procession marched through each of the villages, the locals would be dead quiet. They would stop what they were doing, they would all stand outside, and they would remain silent. For any noise was a sure death sentence that angered Viracocha. They would also have offerings for the procession to hand to the Viracocha, and they would give things like cocoa leaves, chewed corn, insalava, abra hair, feathers, and if you were desperately poor, they were happy to take the boots right off your feet. Just take them. Viracocha needed them more than you did. I had to look up why the llamas, because if the face fat is the best fat, is llama fat the best fat? So I found a study called Fatty Acid Composition of Llama Muscle and Internal Fat in Two Argentinian Herds. The study was done by the University of Arizona, and it's linked down in the description box below if anyone's interested in reading it. In conclusion, they obviously pointed out we should not be eating llama fat, so the llamas are safe for now. Yay! They did, however, end their conclusion this way, quote, "Llama muscle does appear to offer some advantages compared to beef, in that fat and cholesterol contents are lower. This may warrant llama meat consumption, particularly by an individual with a history of health problems that can be addressed by eating foods lower in saturated fats and cholesterol." So Pishtaku is worried about his cholesterol. The procession would have hangers-on, groupies, we might say, which would follow them all the way to the Wahakuna, but they would not come with them to the sacrificial offering. Once at the summit, everyone would stay back except the high priest, his entourage, the mama kuna, and the children. The children would be given an intoxicated substance which would induce a stupor, thus ensuring the ceremony went off without a hitch. They obviously did not need any problem children as they were doing their ritual to Viracocha. The children would be brought up to an altar and they would do whatever rituals they were going to do on the children, and then they would puncture the right hemothorax, which is defined in the Merriam-Webster dictionary as the lateral half of the thorax region between the neck and the abdomen. In his book Narrative of the Incas, written in 1551, Juan de Betanzos wrote the following, quote, "These children to be sacrificed would be collected from all over the land and be carried in litters together and by pairs to be buried." He also said this, quote, Humans always accompanied the Pishtaku to assist in his terrible deeds, and they are often compared to vampires, but instead of sucking blood, they sucked the fat from anyone careless enough to travel alone at night." Unquote. The Corral soup is believed to have collapsed around 1800 BC. So let's get forward to the 1500s, and there's a really interesting story about how these societies in Peru and most of South America were so easily conquered by the Spanish. The Iquitos noticed them traveling down the river. However, they were not as fearful as they should have been. They were intrigued and they believed it was the Viracocha. So they sent a message back to the city and they said to the king, "Heads up, we believe Viracocha is on the way." The king makes a decision to evacuate the city, getting everyone to hide in the jungle, in the trees and the surrounding areas. The conquistadors get to land. All the Iquitos see the conquistadors and they are amazed. They see these white, tall, skinny men in their beautiful outfits just rolling up to the city. So they watch and the conquistadors come in and they go to the city center and they're going, "What is going on here? Where is everybody?" The king then sends a couple of people to the conquistadors to go and check out the situation and brings them offerings of gifts. When the Spanish conquistadors see this, they're like, "Okay, whatever." They take the gifts and this relaxes the king, who obviously didn't read the room right, coming in, and that is how the conquistadors so easily overran that area, but not just that area. There were apparently other areas in South America that this happened to, where people believed the Viracocha was finally returning. So now we're back in 2023. Before this attack happened on Talia, the people in this area, not just in San Antonio de Pintillaco, but the entire area had been terrified at night with strange beings, weird creatures, lights in the sky. I'll put a video in here for you to have a look at. In the news report, you'll actually see the lights in the sky. You can see their reactions, how terrified everybody is. You can hear them shooting guns. You can also witness Talia in the video and her mother straight after the attack. So let's have a look at that.
Las noches se han vuelto aterradoras para los habitantes de la comunidad indígena Iquitu, ubicada en la provincia loretana de Maynas, en la región Loreto. Episodios como este se repiten casi a diario en este lugar. Luces que vuelan unidireccionalmente, acompañados de espeluznantes gritos. Según los moradores de esta comunidad, en medio de la oscuridad aparecen seres extraños a quienes denominan pelacaras, que los atacan salvajemente, desgarrando sus rostros con afiladas armas. Incluso, tal como registraron en este video, una adolescente logró escapar de estos supuestos seres y terminó con un pequeño corte en el cuello.
Mira, no le van a agarrar. Talia, reacciona, hija. Talia, reacciona, hija.
Tras estos escalofriantes relatos y denuncias, un equipo de la policía y la Marina de Guerra del Perú llegó a la zona para realizar una inspección. Para el periodista radial Rubén Mesa, esta no sería la primera vez que escucha de estos ataques, principalmente en la zona rural de la región, donde rápidamente se genera una histeria colectiva.
Hemos tenido la posibilidad de que dos pobladores desde el distrito del Alto Nanay han llegado a la radio para poner en conocimiento de las autoridades la preocupación de la comunidad en torno a la presencia de hechos bastante insólitos.
Sin embargo, para las autoridades, los autores de estos ataques serían las mafias ligadas a la minería ilegal y traficantes de terreno que buscan crear temor entre la población para apropiarse del lugar, usando para ello drones y violentos ataques al azar.
The villagers were in such an uproar after the attack of Talia, they had had enough. And the chief of the village went through to Iquitos and demanded that the Peruvian Navy investigate, which is the highest law enforcement in Peru. The Navy never ever did show up. However, because of the interest, and now it had gone all over the world, the media could not deny it anymore. They had to act somehow. So they sent 2 detectives from Iquitos to San Antonio de Pintiaco to investigate. Let's review what happened to Talia. It was just before sunset and she was out in the yard picking some fruit, which is a task she does all the time to make juice for dinner. Her family were not further than 6 meters away from her. But as I said, these villagers had been tormented for months and months and months because of these attacks. So her brother, Hero, was actually in the front of the house on the porch. Most of the village knew not to go out at night. They'd even moved their farming and everything right back into the village. If you have a look at this picture over here, you can see how they actually brought everything from the farming that they would do in the jungle right back into the village, and they've cleared the perimeter because they are that fearful of what is going on. So Talia's been sent out. It's not sunset yet, just to grab some fruit so she can make family juice. As she's there picking the fruit, she notices the area around her change, right? So the first thing she notices is that a little gust of wind comes past her, which is strange. She also notices that the leaves underneath her feet start rustling, and then she starts hearing a low frequency vibration. It's at this moment that she turns, and when she turns, she sees a man silently coming up the slope on what appears to be a hoverboard, and he's about 1 meter off the ground. He comes right up to her, grabs her before she can even react, pulls her into himself with his hand over her mouth. When he does this, she looks and she sees a second man coming the exact same path as the first, and he comes right up to her. He comes up, he grabs some powder, he rubs in a strange substance, makes it into a cream, blows some in her nose, and the first attacker, he grabs some of the cream and starts rubbing it on her face. It is at this moment, Talia says, they communicated with each other, but she's not sure whether they spoke to each other or they were speaking telepathically, because she says the smaller attacker spoke to the bigger attacker in Spanish, the same dialect of Spanish in the region where she is, because she was asked after, and said to the taller attacker that not too much, he was going to ruin it. Then identifies the taller attacker as the gringo, and she is convinced that the 7.5 to 8 foot attacker is a gringo, and he has what she says is an American accent. The taller attacker brings out a laser scalpel and he starts burning into Talia's neck. With the action of this burning, she moves backwards, and when she moves backwards, she shifts his hood. He stops the burning, he moves his hand a little bit away from her mouth, and he turns around and he slaps her. And it is at this moment that she lets out a blood-curdling scream, and Hero and the neighbor come running around. At the exact same time, the Peruvian, we will call them the gringo, the taller one, and the Peruvian, the smaller one, just to make things easier so we can understand. The Peruvian says to Gringo, we've got to get out of here. We've got to move. Gringo doesn't want to leave her, and they start dragging Talia by her hair. And at that moment, Hero, the neighbor, come past. Right in front of them stand, they say they took aim, they shot, the bullets hit the targets, made no impact at all. They dropped Talia, a button on their ankle, and they shot straight up, and they were gone. Talia was then absolutely traumatized.
Talia, reacciona, hija. Talia, reacciona, hija.
She had to be transported to Iquitos, where she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and as I said earlier, she had the burns on her neck. So the police did give a conclusion to what happened. They came to Iquitos. They spent 2 days there, bearing in mind that this is not just happening there, and we'll get to that a bit later, but they were there 2 days. They concluded their investigation in less than 2 weeks, and they concluded as follows. They said it was illegal miners causing mischief. They said mischief that in their off time would scare the locals and also do some trafficking. That's it. They did not discount Talia's testimony. They did not explain how illegal miners had access to hoverboards that you could fly a meter up in the air. They also didn't explain where the mafia cartel got hoverboards that silently move up a slope and can shoot up in the air. Where did they get that technology? They also didn't explain the height of the perpetrators. No, they were mistaken. It's illegal miners in Peru doing this as a side gig on the weekends. Now, who do the villagers believe is behind the attacks? Well, they don't all believe that it's Los Pelacaras. They're split, it's about half-half. And many of them believe that it is a deep state psychological operation. Other villagers believe that it is the Los Pelacaras. The version of events that the police presented makes no sense. It's not even possible that illegal miners working for the cartel, standing 6 to 7 foot tall. Iquitos, please, do better. Do better. I heard about the story from a YouTube channel named Timothy Alberino. I've put a link down in the description as well as a video where you will actually see them go down to Peru and interview Talia. If you do like these strange and unusual stories, and you probably are subscribed to Tim Alberino, but if you're not, I would highly suggest that you subscribe to his channel. I went to his website and I found the following. It says, author, explorer, and filmmaker. He has an expansive knowledge in ancient ufology, emerging technology, and biblical prophecy. Very interesting information on his channel, especially from a biblical perspective, if you enjoy that sort of content. Now, maybe by divine intervention, we don't know. When Tim was a young man, he dropped out of school and he decided he was going to go to South America. He was going to go to Peru and he was going to go and find his calling with God and find himself. He moved to the region of Altananai, not the exact village where Talia's attack happened. However, in the Altananai region, he lived with the people in the jungle there for 10 years, and he speaks the exact same Peruvian Jungle dialect that they do in Talia's district. Because as you know, if you go to a country and you're not from that country, you don't identify the difference in accents. But as someone who lives in the country, you know that each area has a different way that they say things. A church sponsored them and he brought a crew down. They took food, they took a whole lot of supplies down for the villagers. Have a look around, give them some strategies on how they can try and protect themselves. They even had to give them gun safety training. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested in that, again, checking that out. He does bring another case to his video, which is down below, which I didn't want to bring out because it is gruesome. A person was found in the same area again on the banks of the river. His body was submerged and his face was surgically removed and it was gone. There was nothing left. You see everything in the video, so I would not watch it around children. However, if you can handle it, and if you down in the description box. Now, it could be the deep state with the testimony in the US Congress by David Grush and others under penalty of perjury. It might offer us some clues. When he stated that the Department of Defense had UAPs, which is the new term for UFOs, meaning unidentified aerial phenomenon. On a side note, he also said they recovered aliens, the bodies. We'll get to that in another video. However, he said they have probably attempted or have achieved reversing technology of these UAPs. Would it also be a surprise to anyone at this stage that some dark government op did some crazy psychological operations? It's not a stretch. In saying that, though, I can't imagine why the deep state would need the facial fat of humans unless they wanted it for their super soldiers. Now, could it be some strange alien entity? At this point, we already know that there's definitely something out there. As we've learned a lot about Viracocha and Pishtaku and how this has been going on for thousands of years. Saw Juan de Betanzos when he interviewed the Incas and the Iquitus back in the 1500s. Same attack that happened to Talia. Talia is just fortunate and blessed that she managed to get away from it. The attacks in this area have not stopped. These people are still victimized. Talia is doing better for a long, long time. And if you do watch the video again of Timothy Alberino, I know I've mentioned it the third time, but you will see when Tim walks in, he is a tall man, and obviously he's a gringo, and he's speaking with an American accent. She immediately starts reacting to that. The reason I created this channel is for far too long, people who have had paranormal, supernatural, demonic attacks, sleep paralysis, as I'm sure many of you have had, or at least you know someone who has seen something strange or experienced some horrific thing. I understand because I've had those experiences too. And there's a fear of being mocked or pushed away, but there's even a worse fear. There's a fear that you're losing your mind. And I hope that this channel will be one where we can share stories together. I can bring you stories of these events. We can investigate the legends and the lore of the area as well as the history. And then when we conclude, we can find a biblical answer to this. However, if you are not a Christian, I understand. So thank you so very, very much for watching this video. If you are interested in a biblical perspective after this. I only spend a few minutes going through this. Is it biblical, and how can we protect ourselves from it? With all that being said, thank you so much again for watching my video. Please click the like and subscribe, and don't forget to be one of those that get these adorable little stickers with Harley and Pepper on it. And with that, I hope to see you soon. So what did attack Talia? It could possibly be a deep state psychological operation. It could be something that nobody's even thought of. There's a possibility it could be illegal miners flying on hoverboards, standing 8 foot tall, silently in the Peruvian jungle. Anything's possible. I don't think that one's probable though. The Lord says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in heavenly places." I believe him, and I needed to find out who he was talking about. Straight after he says this, he tells us to put on our full armor. So I went to go and look up what these words mean, and I went to the King James Dictionary, and it says principality, sovereignty, supreme power, a prince invested with sovereignty, the territory of a prince or the country, such as the Prince of Wales, superiority, predominance. It's also what Paul spoke about, right, when he said, "Wherein in times past we walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience." I also looked up what were these high places. They say rising or having risen or being far above the earth, elevated, lofty, as a high flight. The clouds are high in the atmosphere. I also went and looked up darkness because I find these words so interesting, and there's a lot of points on darkness, as you can imagine, but I'd like to just point out a few for you. Please look at number 4, a private place, secrecy, privacy. If you look at number 7, empire of Satan. Again, number 8, opaqueness, land of darkness. Our enemy is not human. Our enemy is something that we don't always see. However, some of us have seen it, but most of us, and I would say all Christians especially, have definitely felt that evil. And our enemy is not flesh and blood. I believe Talia. I believe Hiru. I believe the villages of San Antonio de Pintuyacu. Please keep Talia in your prayers. And I encourage you to read the Bible. It's a page turner filled with intrigue and wonder, stories of fallen angels and Nephilim and Raphaim, with tales of witches and what should happen to witches. There's even giants and satyrs. The Lord even tells us to be kind to strangers. We might be entertaining angels unaware. The description of God's chariots sound exactly like UFOs. There's time travel, and there's stern warnings not to seek after familiar spirits. And even archangels are warring for weeks on end against the princes of the power of the air. And he tells us to be watchful for angels of light who might speak to us another gospel or another testimony. There are even unicorns. Put on your whole armor, never take it off. Do not fear. We're told 365 times in the King James Bible, do not fear. I always say it's the Lord saying daily, Nat, do not fear, I am with you. And I'm saying to you, he says the same thing. Do not fear, he is with you. And for those non-believers, you're still watching, thank you. I encourage you that if you are ever in a terrifying, supernaturally unexplained situation, use the name of Jesus Christ. He will not be offended. Use his name. He will rejoice to protect you. Thank you again so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.